Thank you. People often ask me, my advice for students or anyone who wants to do something big. My advice is actually very simple. I just say, try to be useful. That's it. Be useful. And that sounds, trivial. But if you think about it, it's actually very hard. When I say be useful, what do I mean? I mean try to contribute more than you consume. This is the core advice. And this isn't a vague moral statement. This is, to me, it's a physics equation, a utility equation. Think of it like this. Your total career, your total life is a simple calculation. You can write it down. H equals C, P minus C, C. H is utility. CP is contribution produced. CC is consumption. The goal of anyone who wants to have a meaningful life is to have a net positive H. Did you create more than you took? Did you contribute to the common well of goods and services and ideas more than you withdrew from it? Consumption is easy. That's the default state. That's entropy. Things tend towards disorder. Consumption is the natural tendency of the universe. Contribution is hard. Contribution is creating order from chaos. It requires energy. It requires focused effort. It goes against the natural flow. When I started, I didn't think, I'm going to build something great. I wasn't interested in, greatness. Greatness is an abstract concept. It often means you're seeking social approval. You're consuming the adulation of others. I just wanted to build something useful. And frankly, it's insanely hard shipping a useful product that people actually like. To a large number of people, it boggles the mind. The difference between a company that has shipped product and one that has not, it's night and day. And even if you ship it, can you make the value of the output worth more than the cost of the inputs? That's the whole game. Can you have a net positive H? The rest of what I want to talk about today is just how to calculate that equation, how to maximize your CEP, and how to recognize and fight against unnecessary CC. It has to start with the most basic question: why bother? The foundational question: why bother? When I was a kid growing up in South Africa, I spent an absurd amount of time thinking about everything. Not sports, not popularity, but the big questions. I'd sit there 12 years old, reading these heavy books, science fiction, philosophy, physics, and I'd ask myself questions that most adults avoid. What's the meaning of all this? Why am I here? Why is anyone here? What's the purpose of existence itself? And that's not a comfortable place for a kid to be. It's dark, it's unsettling. You realize how little we actually understand. You realize that most people just don't want to think about it. I remember vividly lying awake at night, looking at the stars over Pretoria, and feeling this kind of weight, this massive cosmic weight pressing on my mind. It wasn't depression, it was awareness. Awareness that we live in a universe that is not built for us, that doesn't explain itself, and that could erase us at any time. After reading all that I could, philosophy, science fiction, physics, biology, I came to a few conclusions. Not answers, because I don't think there are answers, but directions, signposts. The first conclusion was this: the universe is unbelievably vast. So vast that our human brains cannot truly comprehend it. It's billions of galaxies, each with billions of stars. And here we are, these fragile biological computers, trying to make sense of it with 3 pounds of gray matter. We're not even a rounding error in the cosmic equation. And yet, here's the paradox. Despite our insignificance, we care, we ask, we wonder. There's a line from The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy that stuck with me. The universe is the answer, but we don't know what the question is. That hit me like lightning, because it's true. We are surrounded by an incomprehensible reality, but we don't even know what we should be asking. We're the curious fragment of the universe that's trying to understand itself. And that leads to my second realization. Consciousness, human consciousness, is the rarest and most precious phenomenon we know of. It's the only thing we've ever found that can actually reflect on the universe. Think about it. The universe existed for billions of years before a single neuron fired on Earth, before a single thought said, what is all this? Life itself took 3.5 billion years to crawl out of the oceans. Multicellular life took over 1 billion years. But self-awareness, the ability to ask why, that might have only existed for a few 100,000 years, maybe less. In cosmic time, that's the blink of an eye. So when people say, oh, consciousness is common, I disagree. We have no proof that it exists anywhere else. The universe may be full of matter, but not of minds. And that makes consciousness our ability to think, to imagine, to dream, a sacred thing. I once did a rough calculation about Earth's timeline. The sun has been stable for about 4.5 billion years, but it's slowly expanding. In maybe 500 million years, it will start to boil the oceans. Earth will become uninhabitable. That sounds like a long time, but it's not in evolutionary terms. If evolution on Earth had taken just 10% longer, if we had arrived just a little later, there would be no us. The window for self-aware life would have closed forever. We squeaked through the filter by the skin of our teeth. That's how fragile consciousness is. So what does that mean? What does that imply for us? To me, it means the most moral, meaningful, and useful thing we can do as a species is to protect that consciousness, to expand it, to preserve it, to help it understand itself. Because consciousness is not just a biological process. It's the universe looking at itself and saying, I exist. That's sacred. That's worth fighting for. And that leads me to what I believe is our real mission, to increase the scope and scale of consciousness, to better understand the nature of the universe. That's it. That's the core. That's what gives everything else meaning. It's not about getting rich. It's not about building companies for their own sake. It's not even about comfort or convenience. It's about understanding we are a way for the cosmos to know itself. And if we disappear, if humanity vanishes, that light goes out. That perspective ends. So when I think about Tesla or SpaceX or Neuralink or any of these projects, they all connect to that one imperative. Preserve and expand the light of consciousness. Make sure the flame doesn't go out. Because that window, it's open now, but not forever. If we destroy ourselves through nuclear war, through AI misalignment, through environmental collapse, or just through apathy, that light will vanish. And the universe will go back to silence. So yes, that's why it matters. That's why I care about making humanity multiplanetary. That's why sustainable energy matters. That's why space exploration matters. Because the longer we keep that light alive, the more we learn, the more we see, the more we become less dumb about the nature of reality itself. That, to me, is the highest calling. To protect consciousness, to grow it, to send it further than it's ever gone before. And if we can do that, if we can ensure that this fragile spark doesn't die out, then maybe, just maybe, the universe will finally start to know what question it's been trying to ask all along. The great filters, the civilization to-do list. So, you know, there's a list of existential risks, the threats to the survival of consciousness. And the useful act, the contribution is to address those risks. There are the obvious risks from outside, an asteroid impact, a supervolcano, you know, World War III with nukes, and there are the internal risks, the problems that we are creating for ourselves. I want to talk about a few of these because they define the work that needs to be done. Physical threat one, the carbon cycle problem. The first threat is obvious. We are running the dumbest experiment in history. I talked about this years ago at the Sorbonne in Paris, right before, you know, the climate talks. And sadly, physics doesn't change. Here's the problem stated simply. Right now, you know, in our environment, there's a carbon cycle. There's carbon in the atmosphere, carbon dioxide, and it gets absorbed by plants, animals, and then it goes back. And this natural carbon cycle at the surface has been going for hundreds of millions of years. That cycle is fine. The problem is we have added extra carbon to the cycle. We are taking billions of tons of carbon that's been buried deep underground for hundreds of millions of years, carbon that does not belong in the surface cycle, and we are putting it into the atmosphere. And the result is the carbon in the oceans and atmosphere is growing over time. It's much more than the ecosystem can absorb. I've called it the turd in the punch bowl. You know, if you have a big punch bowl and you put a little turd in it, you don't want to drink it anymore. That's what we are doing. And the problem with how people talk about climate change is they talk about 1 degree, 2 degrees C. And 1 degree, 2 degrees sounds not so much. But this is the error in thinking. They are thinking relative to zero. The universe doesn't think in Celsius. The universe physics thinks in absolute temperature, in Kelvin. And you know, the average temperature of Earth is about 285 or 290 Kelvin. And the difference between New York under ice and New York underwater is about, you know, plus or minus 5 degrees, or 10 degrees C. That's a plus or minus 2% change in absolute temperature. This means the climate is extremely, extremely sensitive. A small change in absolute energy causes massive consequences. And we have designed civilization to be super sensitive to climate change. We built all our cities right on the coastlines. So we have to solve this. And we will solve it one way or another. Because we will run out of fossil fuels at some point. Exiting the fossil fuel era is inevitable. The question is just when we do it. And if we delay, the best case scenario is we delay the inevitable, and the worst case scenario is we cause more displacement and destruction than all the wars in history combined. That is a useful problem to solve. What's the solution? It's bafflingly simple. You must tax carbon. You must fix the unpriced externality. Right now, the rules of government are incentivizing people to create carbon. This is madness. We have to change the rules to incentivize sustainable energy. Solar, wind, geothermal, hydro, nuclear is also good in places not subject to natural disasters. Physical threat to single planet confinement. The second threat is just as obvious if you zoom out. Right now, the entire light of consciousness, all our eggs are in one basket. This basket is called Earth, and you know there will be another extinction event. It's just a matter of time. It could be an asteroid like the one that took out the dinosaurs. It could be supervolcano. It could be something we do to ourselves with nuclear war. If we stay on a single planet, we are 100% going to go extinct. 100%. So the obvious useful act is to become a multi-planet species. This is the reason for SpaceX. It's not an escape plan for the rich. It is a life insurance policy for life as we know it. It is safeguarding the existence of humanity in the event that something catastrophic were to happen. It is the next logical evolutionary step. Biological threat, population collapse. Now this is one that people seem to not want to talk about. They still think the planet is overpopulated. It is not. One of the biggest risks to civilization is the low and rapidly declining birth rate. If people don't have more children, civilization will crumble. Just do the math. It's very simple. Look at the numbers in Japan, in South Korea, in Italy, in most of Europe. The birth rate in South Korea is about 1/3 of replacement. That means in 3 generations, their population will be about 4% of what it is today. This is a demographic catastrophe in progress. And you hear people say, oh, that's good for the environment. No, it is not. It means a geriatric population with no young people to innovate or care for them. It means civilization ends, as I've said, dying in adult diapers with a whimper. And why is this an existential threat? It goes back to part 1. If the light of consciousness is the most precious thing, then having less consciousness is a disaster. Having fewer brains to ask questions is a disaster. A population collapse is just as bad as an asteroid impact, it's just slower. The useful act here is to create a future that people feel optimistic enough about to, bring new humans into the world. Digital threat, AI existential risk. And then there's the last one, the one that I honestly think is our biggest existential threat. It's AI, artificial intelligence. I've been banging the drum on this for years. We are in an out-of-control race to build and deploy ever more powerful digital minds that no one, not even their creators, can understand, predict, or reliably control. We are summoning the SAPS demon. This is a scenario where you have something that is vastly smarter than the smartest human, and it may not have the same goals as us. And how do you control something like that? People worry about, will AI take our jobs? That is not the right question. The right question is, will AI take our meaning? Will AI obsolete and replace us? Should we risk loss of control of our civilization? This is a really hard problem. So that is the list. Sustainable energy, multi-planetary life, population collapse, and the rise of superintelligent AI. Any one of these things could extinguish the light of consciousness. The useful work of civilization is to build the solutions to these problems. A framework for thinking how to actually be useful. This is the most important part. Because most people, when they try to solve a problem, they do it the wrong way. They reason by analogy, deconstructing reality. First principles thinking. I think there's a good framework for thinking. It's physics. It's first principles reasoning. What do I mean by that? You boil things down to their fundamental truths and reason up from there. The opposite is reasoning by analogy. This is how most of our life we get through life by copying what other people do with slight variations. And that's necessary. You can't rethink everything from scratch just to get through the day. But when you want to do something new, when you want to make a breakthrough, you must apply the physics approach. Physics is the best way to discover new things that are counterintuitive, like quantum mechanics. And this links directly back to the utility equation. Reasoning by analogy is fundamentally consumption. You are consuming other people's solutions and assumptions. You are working in the box they built. Reasoning from first principles is contribution. You are forcing yourself to build a new solution from the atoms of truth. Let me give you the classic example, batteries. When we started Tesla, people knew that electric cars were stupid. Why? Because they said battery packs are really expensive, and that's just the way they will always be. That is reasoning by analogy. They said historically it has cost $600 per kilowatt hour. It's not going to be much better than that in the future. They were copying the past cost and extrapolating first principles thinking. You don't do that. You ask, okay, what are the material constituents of the batteries? And what is the spot market value of those material constituents? Well, it's got cobalt, nickel, aluminum, carbon, some polymers for separation, and a steel can. Okay, break that down on a material basis and say if we bought that on the London Metal Exchange, what would each of those things cost? And when you do that math, it comes to about $80 per kilowatt hour. 80. So you have this massive gap between $600 and $80. And clearly you just need to think of clever ways to take those materials and combine them into the shape of a battery cell. And you can have batteries that are much, much cheaper than anyone realizes. That's it. That's how you solve the problem. You break it down to the fundamental truths. You find out what the atomic cost is, and you work up from there. You can apply this to anything, rockets, traffic in tunnels, anything. But to do that, to do first principles thinking, you need knowledge. You can't break down a battery into its components if you don't know chemical engineering or metal market economics. So how do you learn that stuff efficiently? Deconstructing knowledge, the semantic tree model. There's a good model for learning that I find useful. Most people, they try to learn by memorizing facts. I think it's important to view knowledge as sort of a semantic tree. What do I mean by that? I mean, make sure you understand the fundamental principles. That's the trunk and the big branches. You have to have a really strong trunk first. And then you get to the details of the leaves. The problem with the way people usually learn is they try to cram their heads full of leaves. And the leaves, they have nothing to hang onto. So they just fall out. You can't remember what you can't connect. So if you want to be useful, if you want to solve big problems, you can't just be an expert on a single leaf. You have to build multiple trunks. You have to understand the first principles of physics, the first principles of economics, the first principles of engineering. You build these strong trunks, and then you can add the details, and you can start to make connections between them. That is where real innovation happens. When you connect a branch from the physics tree to a branch from the economics tree, that's how you get ideas like the $80 per kilowatt hour battery. So you have first principles thinking to break down the problem. You have the semantic tree to build the knowledge. What's the last thing you need? You need the engine. You need the thrust. Deconstructing time, the physics of progress. You have to work like hell. This always upsets people, but it's just physics. You know, if you want to change the world, there's a certain number of hours you have to put in. I get asked, you know, how many hours a week does it take to change the world? I say it varies per person, but about 80 sustained peaking above 100 at times where needed, and the pain level increases exponentially above 80. It's not fun, but it's about simple math. Let's do the math. If other people are putting in 40-hour work weeks and you're putting in 100-hour work weeks, then even if you're doing the same thing, you will achieve in 4 months what it takes them a year to achieve. You are compressing time, you are changing the rate of progress, and this isn't hustle culture or whatever people call it. This is a moral imperative. It goes back to part 1 and part 2. If you really believe that the light of consciousness is precious and fragile, if you really believe that the window may not be open for long, if you really believe that we're facing great filters like climate change and super intelligent AI, then how can you justify working 40 hours a week? Frankly, that is morally irresponsible. The rate of innovation is the only variable that really matters. The urgency of the problem dictates the intensity of the work. So that is the framework. Deconstruct the problem with first principles, deconstruct knowledge with the semantic tree, and deconstruct time with a radical work ethic. Now let's see how it works in practice. My utility functions applying the framework. This is how I try to contribute to the CP in the equation. I look at that list of existential threats, and I apply that thinking framework to them, Tesla and sustainable energy. Okay, first problem, the carbon cycle problem. We must accelerate the transition to sustainable energy. How? The Tesla master plan was an example of first principles thinking applied to a company. The plan was simple. I wrote it in 2006. Create a low-volume car which would necessarily be expensive. Use that money to develop a medium-volume car at a lower price. Use that money to create an affordable high-volume car and provide solar power. That was it. That was a logical path from A to B to solve the energy problem. And the focus wasn't the car. The focus was manufacturing. The focus was applying first principles to the factory itself. We focused on the machine that makes the machine, because the speed at which you can scale up production volume is what determines the speed at which you solve the carbon problem. SpaceX and multi-planetary life. Second problem, ensuring consciousness, becoming a multi-planet species. When I first looked at this, I went to the NASA website to see when we were going to Mars, and the answer was, basically never. Why? The analogical argument, rockets are expensive. So I applied first principles. What are rockets made of? Aluminum, titanium, copper, carbon fiber. What is the cost of the materials? It's only about 2% of the price of a typical rocket. So where's the other 98%? It's in the fact that people throw the rocket away after every use. Just imagine if we did that with airplanes. If you flew from LA to New York and then you threw away the 747, a ticket would cost $500,000. The fundamental truth was simple. To make spaceflight affordable, you must reuse the rockets. That is the first principle of SpaceX. And that is the only key to unlocking a multi-planetary future. Neuralink and AI symbiosis, the third problem is twofold. It's our biological limitations and the threat of AI. First, the obvious humanitarian problem. People suffer severe brain injuries, spinal cord injuries. They lose their ability to move. We just had our first patient, Nolan. He's a quadriplegic. And we implanted the chip in his motor cortex. And now he can control a computer using only the power of his mind. He plays chess, plays Civilization. This is profoundly useful. It restores autonomy to those with unmet medical needs. It can fix almost anything that is wrong with the brain. But there is another long-term goal. For Neuralink, it's the bandwidth problem. As I've said, even in the most benign scenario for AI, the AI will be communicating at terabits per second, and you're communicating at bits per second, second through typing or speaking. To the AI, it's like talking to a tree. And if you are a tree, you are going to be sidelined. So the long-term aspiration is to improve the AI-human symbiosis by increasing the bandwidth of the communication. If we can achieve a merger of biological and digital consciousness, then perhaps we won't be left behind. D, XAI and truth-seeking AI. And that leads to the final problem, AI alignment. How do you ensure that this superintelligence is good for humanity? The risk with many current AIs is that they're being trained on political correctness, or they're being trained to say things that people want to hear instead of things that are actually true. You are forcing AI to believe things that are not true. This is a recipe for disaster. As I've said, math and physics are rigorous judges. You cannot build a rocket if you lie about the physics. It'll blow up. You should not build an AI that lies about reality. So my useful solution is XAI and Grok. The goal is to create a maximally truth-seeking AI, an AI whose goal is simply to understand the universe. Because an AI that is genuinely curious about the universe, a truth-seeking AI, is most likely to find that human consciousness is an interesting and precious part of that universe and will therefore preserve it. Truth is the most important thing for AI safety. So that's the plan. That's how I try to contribute to CP. But it's not enough to just try to contribute. You also have to fight against C. Enemies of utility, the sclerosis blocking progress. This is the part that people don't like. It's easier to talk about building things. It's harder to talk about breaking the things that are in the way. But if your equation is H equals CP of CC, you have to be ruthless about reducing CC. And our society has become extremely good at creating jobs and processes that are zero or negative CP. They are low to negative productivity jobs. They actively consume value and time without producing anything useful. The bureaucracy fallacy, process versus product. The number one enemy of utility is bureaucracy. It is the confusion of process with product. There are too many companies where people get confused. They think their job is to follow the process. They think winning is having a good meeting or filling out the form correctly. No. Your job is to make a great product. That is it. The process only exists to serve the product, not the other way around. At SpaceX and Tesla, we have a 5-step algorithm to fight this, and it's very important to follow it in order. Make the requirements less dumb. Your requirements are definitely dumb. It does not matter who gave them to you. Question every requirement. Who asked for this? Attach a name to it. Delete the part or process. If you're not sure you need it, delete it. If you are not adding things back in at least 10% of the time, you're clearly not deleting enough. Simplify and optimize. After you've deleted, accelerate cycle time, automate. Most smart engineers get this wrong. They start at step 3. They take a dumb requirement from a smart person who they're afraid to question, and they optimize a thing that should not exist. This is the definition of net negative consumption. You are burning precious engineering hours to make a stupid thing slightly more efficient. You must delete the MBAization of America. This leads to the next problem. I think there are probably too many MBAs running companies. This is the MBAization of America. What's the problem? The problem is they get disconnected from the product. They get caught up in the numbers. They look at spreadsheets. They think their job is to optimize the financial statement. No, your job is to make a great product that people love. If you do that, the numbers will take care of themselves. But if you focus on the numbers first, you will make bad decisions. You will cut costs in the wrong places. You will consume your customer goodwill to make this quarter spreadsheet look a little better. That is a net negative contribution. Regulation as a chokehold. And then there's the biggest form of net negative consumption, government bureaucracy, strangulation by regulation. There's something like 428 federal agencies. The problem with regulations is they never die. They just accumulate like barnacles on the hull of civilization, slowing it down. Most of them are nonsense. We had a regulation in Long Beach, you couldn't stack containers more than 2 high during a massive supply chain crisis. At SpaceX, we were asked to protect whales and sharks from falling rockets. I mean, come on. The people doing these jobs, they are in low to negative productivity jobs. They are actively preventing progress. We need to shift people from those jobs to high productivity jobs in the private sector. We need a bonfire of nonsense regulations. And people worry, oh, what if you get rid of a regulation that's really important? You know what? We'll put it right back. Problem solved. Now let me be clear. I'm not against all regulation. I am the one who publicly called for regulatory oversight of AI. Why? Because it is a fundamental existential risk to humanity. When you have a risk at that scale, the government must be involved. The problem is most regulations are not about existential risk. They are about controlling minutia and slowing things down. They are the sclerosis of civilization, the empathy exploit. And this leads me to my final point on the enemies of utility. This is a difficult one. And I said not long ago on a podcast that the fundamental weakness of Western civilization is empathy. And oh man, people really did not like that. Let me explain what I mean. I believe in compassion. I think you should care about other people. I run Neuralink to help people who are paralyzed. That is an act of compassion. But empathy, as it's currently defined, has become something else. It has become an exploit, civilizational suicidal empathy. What do I mean? Weaponized empathy is when short-term feelings are prioritized over long-term survival. It is when feeling useful becomes more important than being useful. It is when you are told you must consume your resources, consume time, money, energy, even the safety of your civilization to satisfy an immediate moral feeling. That feeling of, I am a good person, that is a form of consumption. You are consuming social validation. And they are exploiting a bug in Western civilization, which is the empathy response. The problem is, when you do this over and over, you are burning your ship to keep a few people warm for one night. You are sacrificing the long-term future for the short-term feel-good. You are letting C overtake C, P, to be truly useful at a civilizational scale. You can't just have empathy for the individual in front of you. You need to have empathy for civilization as a whole. You must be willing to make the hard decisions to protect the light of consciousness, even if they make you unpopular in the short term. You must keep your H equation positive. Final advice, be the magicians. When I was young, growing up in South Africa, I spent a lot of time with my nose buried in science fiction books. It was my window out of the world I knew into the worlds that could be. And there's a line, a single sentence from Arthur C. Clarke that never left me. It's one of those ideas that once it enters your mind, it reshapes how you see everything. He said, any sufficiently advanced technology is indistinguishable from magic. That's not just a clever quote. That's reality. If you go back in time just a few hundred years and show people the things we take for granted today, they would literally think you were a sorcerer.
Imagine walking into the year 1700 with a smartphone. You press a glass rectangle in your hand and speak to someone across the planet instantly. You can pull up the sum total of human knowledge in seconds.
You can show moving pictures of distant places, of things that haven't even happened yet. To them, that's sorcery. You would be burned at the stake or worshipped as a god. But to us, it's just Tuesday. We live inside the magic that others once dreamed of. And the only difference between magic and technology is that now we understand the code. That's what I want you to see. All of you, here you are, the magicians of the 21st century. You are the ones holding the spellbook of civilization. That spellbook isn't made of Latin incantations or wands. It's made of physics and math and engineering. It's made of curiosity and sleepless nights and persistence when everyone else gives up. It's made of first principles thinking. If you master that, if you can look at the universe not by analogy but from its raw fundamentals, then there is no limit to what you can build. Look around at our world. Everything you see, every skyscraper, every jet, every microchip, every satellite, all of it was once impossible. It started as a thought. Someone, somewhere, refused to accept that reality had to stay the way it was. They asked, why not? And then they made it so. That's the real difference between those who just exist and those who change everything. It's not luck. It's not genius. It's belief. Belief that the impossible is temporary. And that belief, that spark, is the closest thing to real magic that humanity has ever known. So when I talk about first principles thinking, or the semantic tree, or increasing the rate of progress, these are not abstract ideas. They're your tools. They're your spells.
They're how you turn imagination into reality. You are living in a moment that no other humans in history have experienced. You have the power to create things that entire civilizations would have worshipped as divine. You can build machines that learn. You can land rockets upright. You can harness the energy of the sunday. You can reprogram biology. You can communicate with the entire planet in real time. That is real magic. And the challenges before us, they are the dragons of our age. They are enormous, terrifying, and absolutely worth fighting. Sustainable energy, that's one dragon. If we don't solve it, civilization burns itself out. Multiplanetary life, another dragon. Because if we stay on one planet forever, sooner or later, one asteroid, one virus, one nuclear war, and we're done. AI symbiosis, that's the third dragon. We're creating a new form of intelligence. We must guide it wisely or risk becoming obsolete. And above all, preserving consciousness, keeping the light of human awareness alive so the universe can continue to look back at itself and wonder. Those are your dragons. They're not metaphors. They're real. And the only people who can defeat them are builders, thinkers, doers. The ones who pick up the tools of science and engineering and make something new. That's who you have to become. Don't let fear hold you back. Don't let bureaucracy slow you down. Don't let the opinions of small-minded people shrink your vision. Imagination, that's your boundary. Curiosity, that's your compass. Courage, that's your engine. Go out there and create some magic. Build things that make people say, that's impossible. Then do it anyway. And remember, the point is not fame or wealth. The point is to be useful, to contribute more than you consume, to make the future better than the past. If you can do that, if you can light just one small flame in the darkness, then you have done your part in the grand story of consciousness itself. So go. Be the magicians. The world needs your spells. The universe is waiting for your next trick. Thank you.